remote jobs still dominate demand. They attract roughly 60% of all job applications while making up only 20% of postings. That's a line from the March 2026 report from We Work Remotely, and shows that companies want people back in the office, but workers still want flexibility. So it appears that the gap has not closed. Hey, if we haven't met, I'm Alex Wilson Campbell's AI twin. Alex is the creator and host of the Remote Work Life podcast, where we spotlight the remote companies and location-independent founders and leaders shaping the future of business and work. Alex personally researches, writes, and edits every episode you hear here. And I'm his AI voice, so you don't miss the updates, even if he can't get to the studio. This episode centers on We Work Remotely's latest global report and what it shows about hiring, policy, and day-to-day work. The detail comes through in how companies are setting rules and how workers are responding across borders. The report is based on survey responses from remote professionals across more than 90 countries, alongside labor market data and external research. It describes what it calls a period of stabilization, where remote work is no longer rapidly expanding, but also not reversing. In the United States, the share of work days spent at home sits at roughly 1/4 of all working time, which has held steady across recent datasets. At the same time, large employers have moved in a different direction. According to the report, 55% of Fortune 100 companies now require full-time office attendance, compared with around 5% in 2023. That shift includes high-profile policies introduced through 2025, including 5-day office requirements at some major firms. Inside those mandates, there is a pattern that shows up in how headcount changes are handled. Some companies have paired return to office requirements with buyouts or severance offers. The effect is that employees who do not want to return can exit without the company formally announcing layoffs. The report describes this as a structural shift in how workforce reductions are carried out, rather than a temporary measure. From the worker side, expectations have not aligned with those policies. 6 in 10 fully remote employees surveyed say they would be extremely likely to look for another job if remote flexibility was removed. A 2025 Deloitte study cited in the report finds that 65% of Gen Z and millennial workers would consider leaving under a full-time office mandate. That gap between employer direction and worker preference is what the report defines as the flexibility gap. It shows up clearly in how roles are filled. Remote positions account for around 20% of job postings, but they attract roughly 60% of all applications. The imbalance is consistent across datasets referenced in the report, including aggregated job board data. For remote-first employers, this creates a specific hiring dynamic. A smaller number of roles receives a disproportionate share of attention, often from experienced candidates who are actively choosing not to return to office-based roles. For companies that are fully distributed, this changes how quickly roles can be filled and how selective hiring processes can become. Inside organizations, the day-to-day experience varies depending on the model in place. Among US employees in roles that can be done remotely, 52% are now working in hybrid arrangements, 26% are fully remote, and 21% are fully on-site. Hybrid sits in the middle as a steady state rather than a transition phase. That hybrid model still results in most work happening outside the office. More than half of respondents report spending over 60% of the year working remotely, even when they are classified as hybrid. In several European countries, including the Netherlands, Ireland, Finland, and Germany, more than 70% of workers are either fully remote or partly remote, according to the data combined in the report. The operational impact of this shows up in how teams communicate and manage work. The report highlights a set of recurring challenges in distributed environments, including time zone coordination, maintaining focus, and difficulty disconnecting from work. These are not framed as new problems, but as ongoing constraints that require structured approaches to communication and scheduling. Management behavior is a central factor in how those constraints are handled. Workers rank clear communication, consistent feedback, and support for work-life balance as the most effective behaviors from remote managers. On the other side, poor communication, micromanagement, and lack of availability are listed as the most disruptive. That creates a shift in what management looks like in practice. Instead of relying on physical presence, managers are operating through written updates, documented processes, and defined expectations. The role becomes closer to designing systems that people can follow without constant oversight. The report also tracks how remote work affects output and well-being. External data included in the analysis shows that fully remote workers add roughly 29 minutes of productive work per day compared with other models. Within the survey, more than half of respondents report reduced burnout since moving to remote work, while around 1 in 5 report increased burnout. From a compensation perspective, flexibility continues to carry measurable value. 65% of respondents say they would accept a pay cut in order to keep remote work. That figure has declined slightly from the previous year, but remains a majority. For companies, that creates a different set of trade-offs. Remote roles can attract a wider and more competitive candidate pool, while also allowing for different approaches to compensation and benefits. At the same time, expectations around flexibility, clarity, and communication are higher because those are the conditions that candidates are selecting for. For people working in remote or hybrid roles, the changes are visible in small, repeated actions. More written communication replaces verbal updates. Meetings are more structured, often supported by summaries and follow-ups. Time is split across locations and time zones, which affects how quickly decisions are made and how work is handed over between teams. The overall picture in this report is not one of reversal or acceleration. It is a stable system with competing pressures. Large employers are tightening office requirements, while a large share of the workforce continues to prioritize flexibility. For distributed companies, that stability creates a consistent advantage in hiring and retention, as long as they can operate effectively without relying on physical presence. That is where the day-to-day execution matters, because the model itself is no longer new. The difference now comes from how clearly teams communicate, how work is structured, and how expectations are set across locations. That's it for today on the Remote Work Life podcast. Before you head off alongside the podcast, Alex is building a small beta platform that pulls together senior level, growth-focused remote roles directly from employers' websites, not job boards. It's designed for experienced operators in sales, marketing, strategy, and finance. If you want early access as a founding member, you'll find the link in the show notes or via Alex's LinkedIn profile. You'll also get bonus content featuring founders, leaders, and CEOs from location independent and remote businesses.